Welcome to the Music Business Buddy, the podcast decoding how the modern music industry actually works. I'm Johnny Amos, industry consultant, artist manager, producer, educator, and author of The Music Business for Music Creators. Every Wednesday, I explore the ideas, technology, and industry shifts shaping the future of music. This show helps creators navigate the rapidly changing business of music.
Hello everybody and welcome. Okay, so let's go straight into the subject. You know, when music is played in public, right? Whether that might be live performance or whether that might be music being played through speakers. Let's say there's a shop, a hairdresser's, a gym, or wherever it might be, and they play music and then they pay a license to say, yeah, we're allowed to play this music publicly. And then in theory, everybody whose music has been played then gets paid, right? That's how it should work. That's how a lot of people think it works, but it doesn't really work that way, because how can you possibly know which songs have been streamed? Let's say somebody takes over on this shift and then they play these songs and, oh, I don't know what songs I played, right? It's an age-old thing, and it's probably got even worse in the streaming era, because we can just hook up a laptop or a phone and play a playlist. That's wonderful from a consumer's point of view, but it's a nightmare when it comes to back-end royalty collection and fairness and accuracy. Now, very often people will say to me, Johnny, how do we know if we've been played in like a shop or on radio, wherever it is? How do we know where our music is being used, and how do we actually keep a track of it? Well, there kind of isn't really an answer for that, and there never really has been. However, that's not good enough, is it? We want more. Now, that's what today's about, right? I came across a company called Audoo, right? So that's A-U-D-O-O, Audoo. And what they actually do is they have created an audio meter that is used in venues to actually track what is being played in order to remunerate rights holders fairly. So that's music publishers, record labels, artists, performers, songwriters, etc. Now, in order for that to actually work, you need immense technology. You also need people to buy into it and actually use it. And venues don't really want to have to pay for it. So what's the solution? Well, that's what today's episode is all about, as I introduce to you Ryan Edwards, CEO of Audoo. Have a listen to this. Ryan, welcome to the Music Business Buddy. I'm really, really pleased that you've agreed to come on and talk with me. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Yeah, how are you?
Good. I'm all right, thank you, mate. Yeah, I can't complain. We've just discovered that we were brought up like mere miles from one another. Which is, we are flying the flag for the West Midlands in the UK here. This is good.
Definitely. So yes. So I always find, you know, we've grown the business around the world, and the thing that people always know. So I'm a Wolves fan, and you know, people say, "Where are you from?" Nobody knows the town of Stourbridge, but when you say Wolverhampton and Wolves, they are straight in and they know us as a team. So, which there isn't a lot to brag about at the moment, but they've heard of it, which is good. So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you know, it's all going to go horribly wrong here now, Ron, because I'm a West Bromwich Albion supporter.
Oh, no.
I know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That's it. We're done. We're done.
That's it. No, that's it.
Well, that's nice that you've got, because if I say to people around the world, you know, West Bromwich Albion, oh, where the hell's that? You know, I go, well, yeah, it's this little place kind of like near Birmingham, but not quite Birmingham, but like, you know, they go, they've lost, you know, they're lost at that point. That's it. Gone, you know.
I mean, I guess it's because they're a small, irrelevant team, mate. I mean, I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. It was too easy. So, because everywhere I go, they know Wolves. So, you know. So.
Yeah. I think I probably picked the wrong team a long time ago.
True. Yeah. No, I blame my dad, and he knows it, and he, you know. So, and even my daughter growing up in London, I tell her she's a Wolves fan. She tries to tell me that she's not. She's like, I want to support a team that wins. And I'm like, no. It's chosen by your dad. That is it.
Yeah. That's not how it works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to be as miserable as me. Okay. Just get on with it. So, yeah.
Good education, mate. I like it. I thoroughly approve. Ryan, we have much to discuss, right? Because I tell you, I am not a religious man, Ryan, right? But you are doing God's work.
No pressure.
The amount, the amount of like panels, seminars, workshops that I'm involved in, people say to me, when music gets played in like venues and stuff, like who's actually calculated, like how does that? And I go, I know. It's okay. Like, don't worry. I'm going to give you an honest answer and say that a lot of it is done on estimates and all that kind of stuff. People look really worried, and I go, I know, it's okay. But the future will change eventually. So that's the thing, right? A lot of like public performance royalties are still largely based on estimates rather than actual usage. So, what problem did you see, in the industry that convinced you that something needed fundamentally changing?
Of course, I guess to probably set the scene, there's a little bit of a backstory of why. So I was a drummer in an indie band called The Lines. So we went into Wolverhampton band. We had a top 10 single in the UK. If anybody was in and around Birmingham between the early 2000s and the mid 2000s, the venue we played at, be it the old Barfly, be it the Academy ones. We did, I think, all of the chains. We opened for Ocean Colour Scene.
Wait, hang on,
Academy,
Lines.
so yeah.
The Lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay, I remember the lines. I didn't know that.
Cool.
Okay, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, I was the idiot doing this at the back, but I
think you're a rock star, man. I mean, okay, you're this
retired,
great
tech
guy as well, but you're a rock star, mate.
But
that's brilliant. Wow. Sorry, carry on.
But no, that's where this all came from. So we'd put music out in the mid 2000s, and then, like so many bands, it just hadn't worked for. We got a good Midlands following. We actually got quite a good Northern following, but it's hard, right? It's really hard to make it, and it was the big indie scene, and there were so many bands that probably looked and sounded like, and it was just what happened. Anyway, fast forward to probably 15 years later, which is kind of 5-6 years ago in real world now, and I was walking through one of the department stores in Oxford Street and heard one of our songs playing. Hadn't heard it for such a long time. And my wife and I were walking through, and it's so funny because they're like, "Oh, I haven't heard this for ages." And then you go, "This is me. That's great." It's not just my mum that's listening to this song anymore. It's still being played. And my wife's an accountant, and she turned to me and went, "So how much are you being paid today?" And I'm like, "Look, it's not going to buy that expensive handbag. So forget that. That's not going to happen at all, right? Because it's a quarter, because it's a 4-piece band plus a publisher plus a music label plus everybody else who gets a cut. Like, you're talking a fraction of a penny at best." Anyway, I just couldn't fathom how anybody was playing my music still that I didn't know, and B, how that was going to be tracked through. So did some research, and I'd spent that 15 years since The Lines in tech and data products. So I headed up data for Visa across Europe. Did an app development business with some friends, which we'd sold. So we really, really understood kind of building tech, understood big data. And I tried to track it. I tried to track on my royalty statement. I spoke to some friends. "Hey, are you seeing this? Do you get that?" Etc. And actually it was one, like, I don't know, it's probably a Sunday evening, just did some Google bashing of how do a PRS or an equivalent know that I was played in there. Of course, what I found was podcasts, forums, articles, and everything from Bloomberg to the little guy with a bedroom blog going, it's all guesswork, it's all estimations. If you happen to be in the point where they do a survey, you can do really well that quarter. If you don't, it doesn't. And I'm kind of sat there going, well, this has just got to be leveled right. Streaming is pretty much perfectly accounted for. The economics of it is a whole different debate, but they know what's being played and what's going on. Why is this not being applied? Because we'd see, I'd got an Alexa in the kitchen, I'd used Shazam over the years, and why can't you just mash all this together and bring it together? And that is genuinely how the journey started. And the more people that I talk to, be it industry people, be it friends who, we're probably just still writing in bedrooms and just putting stuff out just for fun. The more people validated it and were like, yeah, this is kind of, this needs to be solved. And here I am 5-6 years later, solving it, running around the world, installing these in venues as far as New Zealand to my local coffee shop here in London and everything in between. It's kind of crazy how it's gone. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Do you
Oh,
know, I
thank
mean,
you.
it's something that, many people wonder about is like, especially, I mean, I'm familiar with the survey process,
Of course. Yeah.
which is kind of, I suppose it's better than nothing, but it's pretty
Yeah.
farcical in some ways. Um, and then, well, I reached out to you recently about
Mm.
coming on here and talking about this. And what I did just before I reached out to you, I just kind of did like a little chat GPT search. I was like, hang on, let me just have a look at, like, just to double check, am I missing something? Like, as things moved on, in recent times, and I'm not aware of it. And the answer, of course, is no, right?
Yeah.
And so, and it's good to know actually that your company comes up as number one on that
Oh, good.
survey.
Oh,
So, like,
even better.
yeah, like as to
Good.
as to who is tackling this problem,
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and I'm familiar with, like, there are certain like there's BMAT, right, in
Yeah.
Spain.
Yeah. Yeah. In Spain, the Spanish guys. Yeah. Hmm.
They're kind of, and there's a company in, like, sort of China, Singapore, that also do a similar thing. I don't know how well that's
Cool.
working. And then I'm familiar with Sound Mouse, right? But that's more for
Yeah.
like
Cool.
television and stuff.
It is more
Um,
broadcast. Yeah. No, those guys,
yeah.
well, they're great. They're really great at what they do.
Super.
Yeah. So
I
yeah, really
figured
well.
you would. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
like, right,
Look, we all know each other because you have to, right? So, in fact, both Sound Mouse and BMAT. So it was Mark and I'm trying to think who was BMAT. It might have been Indio. We did a panel at South by Southwest in Austin together last year. So it was
Oh,
Universal and the three of us all kind of talking about it, and it's quite nice because Sound Mouse are very, very broadcast focused. BMAT are a little more broadcast, but actually they've from what I've seen and from talking to them, they're more focused on the back end and the kind of operation of a rights organization. And we're kind of that, kind of last 9 yards of actually what happened in the real world. So it's really nice that we kind of all know each other and know kind of what's going on. And yeah, look, you're always going to bump into each other and see each other with these things because we've got the same client base ultimately as well. So yeah, they're great.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, really
Oh,
good at
that's
what they do.
really good. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
glad I mentioned that because,
Cool.
I wasn't sure, because I was
Mm.
thinking hopefully you kind of like, you're all aware of what each other's doing. You're working in
Yeah.
partnership on some level, and that's super. Of course you are. You're a smart guy. Of course you are.
So
Um,
yeah, look, yeah, it's also a very, very small industry. So you've got to have
yeah.
friends. Look, there's always going to be bits that you're going to compete on, and that's fine. That's business. That's the day to day of trying to grow and survive and do all the things that you have to do in between. But also, yeah, you get to a conference and you see each other, you straight up to each other and you say hey, and you catch up. It's you never know where you're going to see things, and there have been moments with I won't say who, but where we've actually co-pitched together because they've gone, hey, somebody's come to us about this, but they've also mentioned what you do. Why don't we just pull this all together and just give them one price? And you go, yeah, cool. That really makes sense. Let's do that and make it easier for the client as well. However we need to do it. So yeah,
Oh, that makes sense. Oh, that's
yeah,
really, really good. Okay.
of course.
I mean, okay, so things like, you said earlier about walking around that store and then kind of
Yeah,
going, hang on, I recognise that.
yeah,
That's a nice little drum fill.
yeah,
That kind of thing,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
He's good.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I've learned this song. That's good. That.
yeah,
Um, things like Shazam have become
yeah.
useful. I mean, they often, there's kind of some insights into, things like perhaps like in-store playlisting use and sort
Hmm.
of soft indicators on usage. But we're a fair array, from sort of creating that sort of fairness and accuracy, let's say.
Yeah.
Um, do you think that there are songwriters, or rights holders generally, that are
Mm.
missing out on royalties because they just simply don't know that their music is being played and don't know how often their music is being played?
100%. I think what's interesting is Shazam has become a discovery tool. Like when Apple bought it a few years back, it's gone from, kind of, it was almost, well, it was pub quiz, wasn't it, originally? That's why they created it. It was so you could kind
Yes.
of cheat in a pub quiz and you could phone up and do it. And of course, it's evolved, and Apple bought it a few years ago. And it's now very much about, you're in the restaurant, you hear it, you Shazam it, and you go, great, just add it to my playlist, right? Be it on whichever streaming service you're doing it. It's just thrown in there. So I think you've got that side of it for the consumer. I know on the other side for the labels and the publishers, etc., they're looking at their data because they're going, well, who's the next big thing? Who's about to blow up? So how can they discover that way? But I guess from a rights payment perspective, that's very user led. That is, I'm sat in a restaurant right now. I go, that's a cool song. I hit it once and then it goes off. So you've got one song on one phone, or maybe a few songs if the playlist is particularly great, and it just disappears. Where with surveys, it's a small amount of period in a small amount of time, and surveys by virtue are inaccurate because they may use Shazam. Every song has you'll know this as well, codes that sit behind it. So a bit like in book world, an ISBN number, you've got ISRCs, ISWCs. So do you know it was definitely that version? How high is the accuracy? What was going on? What was the time? What was the count? All of those kind of things. So you've got this real snapshot of maybe 2-3 hours where, I don't know, somebody sat in a cafe, sat in a restaurant, just almost manually writing down and what that is. If you think about the amount of music hours that is consumed, if you take just the UK, PRS's AGM last month, they're licensing nearly 400,000 locations across the UK now annually for public performance. So that is a lot of people, a lot of hours of music to capture. So you've got that side. The other thing with the surveys is, they're probably using agency staff who are not that engaged, not going to be really deep onto it. So there's some human element of inaccuracy there as well. And then it's how you roll it up. So, does that cafe down the road from you in Birmingham versus the one down the road from me here in London, do they genuinely look alike? There's always going to be some bits. If it's a heavy metal bar, I'm pretty sure Black Sabbath's going to be on repeat. I'm keeping it local, but you're going to see these kind of things. So yes, there are patterns, but the diversity of music that we've seen since we've been rolling out in different markets around the world is, it's more than tenfold, to what it is. And I'll give you an example. I won't say who it is because I won't release their name, but there's a rights organization that we launched with last year, and they did their first distribution on our data for the first time in December. So for their kind of Q4 distribution. And they looked at their proxy data set, which would have been the surveys, some radio overlay, let's pull in a bit of streaming charts, etc. And they compared it to what we'd done in the real world. And there was 94% difference. That's how far out it was. So we were like, oh my life, to the point that they couldn't even just swing their distribution that hard because, it would have probably caused them legal issues and different problems there. So what they did is they went, well, what we'll do is we're going to do a weighted approach with the Audoo data of 20% of the distribution. And over the next year, we'll increase that per quarter and we'll show that path to accuracy. And of course, what it also did is they went, we now need more venues. Great for us because they bought more of our technology. They've installed it into even more. They've gone wider. They've gone deeper. They've gone, okay, where do we think we're underrepresented? Do we have enough gyms in the mix? How many gyms do we license? Right. We need to make sure that we're in a really, really good proportion of those to make sure it's all coming through. So the change in the swing is huge. And as you say, that kind of, do we think rights holders are being over and underpaid and incorrectly paid or not paid? Absolutely. And there's an explosion, in just my short journey of this. We've seen catalogue buyers just come and raise billions. We're not talking hundreds of millions, we're talking billions, and buy people out of their catalogue. So music has gone from this kind of sexy, cool industry where you're always chasing the latest thing to now being a real asset value that, the smartest private equity houses and bankers in the world are going, yeah, let's go and throw 2, 3, 4 billion at that to go and buy those catalogs and collect on them, almost like a rental income of buying a property, right? Let's keep driving it and using it. So there's a lot of money at stake here as well.
I think that we've seen that even just through streaming alone, right? Fintechs coming in and going, right, this is this kind of predicted growth or stability really is investable, but add this into the equation, and that's another couple of zeros, right? I mean, that's wow.
And I think it goes full circle, since we launched and, we go in business, every time we get a little bit of press, we do something like this, I always get messages in, be it LinkedIn, be it email, be it, I'm terrible on social media. Somebody in the team will be like, you've got a message on Instagram. I'm like, how do I log in and do that again? But, you go on and look at it. And one of my favorite ones was just after we kind of fully announced ourselves a few years back, there was a florist in Ascot. This lady wrote to me and she's like, I wanted to write to you because how do I get your device? She called it. She said, because I'm an ABBA maniac and all I play all day is ABBA. And I'm really worried that Benny and Bjorn aren't being paid. I wrote back to her and I went, look, Benny and Bjorn, I think, have got a few quid in the bank. So don't worry about the pennies for them. But it actually showed that business owners who are paying their license to have the right to play music, a bit like we pay a TV license at home to the BBC and things like that. Like they really, really care. They, because business supports business generally, not always. There's always a
Yeah,
few
yeah.
outliers out there. But to know that I don't know, I would guess her license is probably between £500 and £700 a year for kind of a small florist like that. That's a considerable amount of money that she's paying as a business owner, but she's using that music to set her atmosphere. It might be a turn off for some people. Maybe they don't want 24/7 ABBA. So I think it sounds like fun. But it's kind of all those things. So it's making sure that money can genuinely flow through to those people. And I've always said, if Ed Sheeran is genuinely 50% of the pot, fair play, Ed. You're great. You're
Yeah.
massive. Everybody loves Ed, and Ed should be getting his 50% of the pot. But if he's only 10% of the pot, I think, I don't know him, but I think he's probably the kind of guy who'd be like, guys, I only want what's mine. I don't want anything above and beyond that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And sometimes things can just kind of go onto those bigger stacks and go, yeah, it's probably Adele is probably that there, and so that's become a thing.
Yeah.
So is the could we just check? Can I just check the tech side of it? So is it like a kind of a hardware microphone that gets installed?
But this is it. So here's one. It's almost a little bit Blue Peter, that wasn't it? So this is the audio meter. I'll tell you what. If I hold up my phone, that should give you kind of a size. That's it's a 2-year-old iPhone. So somebody will know what that is. Yeah. So we call it an audio meter, and it does two things. So on the front, you'll probably see there's 8 holes. So there's 8 microphones there, because we capture audio reflections from every way. I always joke, we're the opposite of Alexa. So where Alexa listens for your voice and your command, we listen for the background, essentially. And that's why we get all those reflections in. And then in the really big clubs and areas, we've got a USB and we've got a jack plug. So if we can get like a nice clean feed off a mixing desk or something like that, because there's live music and it can go out the way, or you can go to like a amp distribution system, we can do that. So yeah. So somebody once described us as an industrial size Shazam, which I think is quite an easy way of explaining it. So we'll take that. And then the only extra bit that we've done is we're GDPR compliant. So what that means is we were really conscious that if you go and plug this into a local cafe and you just put it by a table because there's a speaker close, people could be having all kinds of very private conversations, or I don't know. I've definitely done it with my mates where I owe them money and it's like, hey, let me transfer it to you. And they've given me their sort code and account number and you've just typed that in and done it. We didn't want to capture that audio. We didn't want it existing in our environment. It's probably some of my Visa background. You're like, I used to have retailers say all the time, oh, well, we'll just store the card numbers. Why on earth would you want to store card numbers with the amount of hacking and thing that's going on? And we've done the same. So we never store or transmit audio. We create something called a digital fingerprint in real time. So it basically, the mic gets it, converts it into those zeros and ones, and then we pre-fingerprinted in the cloud. So we've got about nearly 200 million songs there. So any song that you would find on a streaming service, we have, and we get them at the same speed. And then we're essentially doing like an algorithmic matching process there to go, yeah, we definitely know that this was Domino Effect by the Lines, or it was this by this band, or whatever else it needs to be. So we can then give that, and then we have all the metadata that sits with it as well. So all of those codes to make sure if it's a different writer or performer, if there's multiple writers, or there's a collaboration or whatever it is, that we can report all of that detail as well. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my word. Wow. So before we go any further, Ryan,
Of course.
Can I just say, well done and thank you.
Of course, thank you. It wasn't easy, right? We're 15 million pound into building, and still adjusting and still learning and still doing bits as we go. And every territory brings us new challenges and new things that we have to go into. And there are certain African territories that we went into last year where they just kept getting stolen, and we're like, stop stealing them. There's no value to anybody else, this little box, other than us. But we've seen all those things, and look, it's weird because it's such a full circle moment for me, because music was my life growing up. You had the band, you exit it because you got to go and get a proper job because you got to grow a family and all those kind of things, and that's really good. But actually to bring back what is the passion that ultimately took me out of the Midlands the first time, to bring that back and seeing it, and it's funny because I've had so many of these big artists say, look, we've just got to get the right people paid. That's all we're trying to do here. Like, let's, what can we do more to support? What can we do more to make noise? And how can we help you on this journey as well? So yeah, it's great.
That's amazing. I mean, I know that there's a lot of, I've spoken to on this podcast to many rights management specialists who, make a much more, try and make a big education lift on accurate metadata and stuff, because obviously that's pretty crucial here as well, because
completely,
if you've detected, this, and this over here, if the metadata isn't there, then the accuracy isn't there, and you've done your bit and perhaps they haven't done theirs. So it's all these different parties kind of working together to support that bigger goal, isn't it? But no, that's what kind of like I'm just interested to see, because everyone would want this to roll out everywhere, right? So what kind of like what sort of barriers to adoption are you seeing at the minute?
So we see this kind of two sides. There's the clients that we have. So we started the business actually out of Australia, and that was purely a COVID thing. They were through lockdowns, life was looking normal, and we spoke to APRA, which is the Australian Performing Rights Association, and they were like, "Oh my God, we need this. How can you get it to us? How quickly can we move on this?" And so we're now nearly 3 years into working with them, and it's been amazing, because what it's done, what they did for us, first of all, we were like, hey, can we even do this? This is a new technology, a new business. Can we prove it works? Well, there's nothing harder than being able to deploy your technology on the opposite side of the planet and staying up through the night, basically, to make sure they're connecting and everything's getting on. So that was like proven to our investors as much as anything. Hey, yeah, it worked. See, we said we'd do it. It's like, phew, okay, that's good. The second side was actually to learn how to roll it out. So the reason we call it an audio meter was actually, it was those moments that you have in life again. Somebody knocked my door to install my smart meter, and he put it in. We had the little screen in the kitchen for a few days. I went, is that how much it costs every day? Please, can we just put that in a cupboard? I need to stop looking at it. But the realization for me was, okay, it's kind of cool to have a little screen and see your amount on that screen. But actually the value was for, I think I'm with EDF, was for them, because they don't have to send a bloke down my road every month to go in, can I knock your door and can I get a meter reading? So it was automation, and that was what, I was like, oh, you have an electricity meter, you have electricity, meter, you have music, you have an audio meter, and you do it that way. So that was kind of how we built it out. What they did in Australia was they were like, look, we don't know if the venues will or won't accept this, and I was like, well, why wouldn't they accept it? I said, well, surely you can do some level of enforcement. You can just change your terms and conditions and go, hey, if you're paying for this and you get selected, you have to have one. So they wrote out to, a couple of hundred venues at start. And actually they did it in a really exciting way. So the first 100 audio meters in Australia, they named them after Australian artists. So, there was a Kylie Minogue one, there was a Tash Sultana one, etc. So basically on the front in the circle, there was a little sticker with their name on it. And the idea was then to go back to their management teams and their publishers and go, hey, look at this bit of fun, if they can tweet about it and do it. And it went crazy. So, we had I think it was in Brisbane, we had a furniture store put out a press release to say they were the most accurately paying store for music in the States. So what it went from was, will they accept it, to we saw a scramble of people going, hey, this is my favorite artist. How can I get one? How do I get their audio meter, etc., and really, really use it? So we saw, again, this business supporting business, desperately trying to get them, which was great. And then, of course, you build your case studies and you take that into other markets. So markets like Belgium, like Ireland, like South Africa, with the Netherlands and a few other places as well. And we're able to show them the data from Australia. The second thing then is, of course, they have a distribution policy. So this is, this is the proxy data, this is the survey data, this is how it's done. They completely rewrote their distribution policy, because they went, we can't, because we now get essentially accurate data. Look, it's not 100% perfect. No technology and no recognition is, but they went, we've gone from, surveys, proxies, etc., to just growing a really, really sample base. And the amount of data, even in that first month, went from, them kind of analyzing about 40,000 songs a year to getting kind of like 2.5 million songs a week, so it really, really exploded what that looked like. And then, of course, they could provide value back to their customers. So, because the rights organizations serve publishers and they serve the writers, or, kind of almost mutually and exclusively at the same time. So they could go back to them, be it through their board meetings, their distribution committees, and go, guys, this is everything that we're bringing into here. I always think there must be a comical file where they went, this is what we had, and it's a little stack of paper like that, and this is what we got, and they just slam down, tens of thousands of pages and go, but it's all good. So we really saw that. And then what we also saw was the artists were loving it because they were going, I'm now more relaxed, I'm being paid more correctly. Their statements went from, you just got a check at the end of the quarter or electronic payment, to you could actually see the counts. So, we had one artist send us a message saying, thank you, because they sent us a photo of their statement, and it was like how many plays they'd had in fitness and how many plays they'd had in retail and hospitality. So all of a sudden they could analyze and understand how their music was being consumed. It wasn't like, hey, do I just trend in gyms or do I just trend in here? So this whole insight piece, and I always say, I hope it doesn't impact how they write, because I always think, you don't want people going, hey, I'm just going to write a banger for a gym. I want them to write because it's just the right song to write and the right music and that moment in time that they're having those emotions. But it really, really came full circle. So that's the positive side and where it's gone really well. Sadly, there's a negative side, which is rights organizations who either are hiding distribution policies, we think maybe have huge influence from major publishers on their boards, and that could be a few of them or a single one of them who are saying, well, no, I want this distribution weighted to me because I'm a major publisher and I should be 20% of the pot, and they're just going in for a percentage. And actually we've seen not fight back, but we've seen a lot of indecision and a lot of just reluctance to evolve and improve and get better. Because I think the observation that we have of rights organizations, and I think most people who work there would admit this, is they are very big, they are very, very slow, they are very, very top heavy. And I even had one of them recently say to me, they said, look, we're a bit like a government body. And I said, yeah, so trying to get decision, it goes through committee after committee after committee, and they don't want to do it that way. So being the cheeky kind of technology startup that we are, we kind of go in and we just cause a bit of disruption. So, we go and install some audio meters, we release the data, we go and tell the artist if we think of being underpaid who it is, so they can write to them. So, yes, it's a sales commercial tactic to do that, to really show them. But actually, the artists and the publishers, again, they're not arguing with that. They're going, guys, if this is a better, cleaner data set and it's more accurate, then this is where we need to go to. So it's kind of bringing that full circle. So it's getting the ones who get it, who are brilliant. So yeah, I guess my probably most favorite locally would be Imro and what they're doing in Ireland, because they are so driven to evolve, to reduce their payment cycles, to get the money out quicker, to drive this accuracy, to really, really represent their members and things like that. So it's really interesting how that works.
Wow, God,
Yeah.
that's a lot. So, okay, so here's something I hadn't thought about until just now when you said it, right? Is that, I kind of thought like the overarching goal here was, fairer, more accurate royalty statements, but actually what's also happening here is a kind of a more informed understanding of strategy.
Completely. Yeah. Yeah.
I never thought about that.
And we've done this, I've done this with, in fact, I did it with Elton John's team a couple of years ago. Like I showed them the most likely time that Elton was to be played at, anywhere that we'd installed around the world in the week. And it was like 11 a.m. on a Thursday. I was like, so guys, don't ask me why, but we know it's 11 a.m. on a Thursday. So if you're going to put a press release out, if Elton suddenly decides to go back on tour or do anything like that, drop that press release on a Thursday morning, because that's it. So you can actually make tangible decisions. And we have seen this. And again, we did this with the guys in Ireland. So a couple of years ago, one of the most played Irish artists in Australia was a girl called Leah Hart. And Leah had never toured Australia. Never. And it's like, guys, get her on a plane. She's outstripping U2 right now, as an Irish artist in Australia. So, and she wasn't, big radio artist or anything like that. It was somebody discovered her somewhere, and then it had just filtered, and people had probably Shazammed it and heard it and used it and kept playing. And it was really, really amazing to see that happen. So and as you say, it's kind of the mission started with, let's just get the data, get it to the rights organization and get people paid. If we do that, that's pretty good. What we've now starting to see and evolve to, and it's, it's the bit that we're kind of learning on the fly as a startup, because you have to adjust as you go, is, yeah, I'm getting the biggest song funds on the planet, ring me and go, hey, we were talking about you and we're about to spend tens, if not hundreds of millions on a couple of song catalogs. What does your data say? And I'm going, oh my life, this is like, big responsibility to provide accuracy in what we're doing and show them all the caveats. But that from management teams going, hey, if I'm going to go to this country and book a tour, do I skip a city? Do I do 2 nights in this city, etc.? What do you think is happening? And even when somebody goes and tours, does their music usage increase? So actually, is it worth doing a tour, even if you can only sell 80% of the tickets, and still be profitable, because you know that your consumption of music is going to increase that much, that kind of, residual asset then increases, and you might see more on the back end anyway. So it's really, really fascinating.
Wow.
The data never lies, right? That's the reality. No. So yeah.
No, not that kind of data.
Definitely.
That's data that cannot be fudged, right? I mean, that's
exactly.
That's wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've got these questions I got in mind to ask, and I'm full of like loads of other questions.
It's going to be a 40 podcast, isn't it?
I know, yeah. Wow. So I'm just thinking about how this could be. So let's say, for example, like small venues, and they go, oh, if we want to install an audio meter, we're struggling to get by, we have to pay. But actually, there's loads of good PR for it, right? It's like, we're a venue, like you mentioned about that one in Australia, in Brisbane, that they champion.
They wanted to show it.
Yeah. There's pride that comes with that, which is actually amazing PR for those companies that say we pay, accurate money to rights holders. All that money, all this music that gets played in here gets tracked. That means a lot to a lot of people. So maybe people need to, or venues, I should say, really need to embrace that aspect of it. Do you think?
Yeah, I think, look, we've got to get to everyone. We want everyone to know us. So, it's part of the journey. And yeah, look, anybody who's ever written to us and said, can I have one? Even if it's in a market, a territory where we're not working with the rights organization, we're like, look, we'll still send you one, because at some point that rights organization should start working with us and come online. I can go, hey, by the way, organically, we've just got, a couple of hundred, couple of thousand in your market from people. So the data can switch on, instantly, and you can start to see that flow through. So yeah. And we've actually just done this with the Music Venue Trust, who are just amazing campaigners, what they've done here. And they got a lot of their venues. There's a thing called Tariff LP, which is to do with grassroots music and how it's paid for, and because there's a lot of young artists who, quite frankly, might have only formed a band last week and written a couple of covers, and then are playing the pub this weekend. Well, they're not a member of the rights organization. So if they're not the member, then there's no royalty due, because it's a couple of kids and they're not there yet. It's probably not even them worth joining it, because the payout would be so low. So they're trying to help protect grassroots music venues, which are typically smaller, but we all have to start in them. Prove if it was, registered repertoire, or if this is genuinely kids. Because one of the things that we can do is we can go, look, we know that there was music playing, but we just don't know what it is, and that's most likely to be, that kid that was doing something, or it can be a really, really bad cover, and that happens as well. So you can go, oh wow, even our recognition can't get that. It was so out of key and so off tune. It's so weird and wonderful. So yeah, and when the MBT wrote out to their venues, like within about 48 hours, they were all just like, yeah, absolutely, send us one. Do you need us to install it? Do you need us to plug it in? Like, do you need us to connect to anything? And it was like, wow, we were overwhelmed by just the reception of, how quickly can we get one and do it? So yeah, and I think a music venue is going to really get it, because that's, you don't start a music venue if you don't really love and care for music, right? But all the other business owners, they're doing everything else that they need to do day in, day out. They would have definitely thought about how they've created their music, but the actual end point of music flowing, getting people paid and everything. That's the bit that, who thinks about that? Well, random people walking through a department store on a Saturday afternoon and hearing themselves. It's there's a few of us idiots like that, but generally, the rest of them, it's just, they're just like, hey, I paid my bill, right? I paid it. It's done. It's dealt with. And sadly, it's not the full part of the story, really.
No, I suppose that's the other education lift there is for other types of retailers that are sort of not music related, but use music, everything
Yeah.
from sort of retail outlets to hairdressers, gyms you mentioned, that's kind of I mean, it's still full of music fans, right? People that work there, that are involved with it, that walk through it, that engage with it. It's like you don't meet many people in life that go, do you know what? I really don't like music. Like you don't meet many people like that.
I don't. If they don't, I don't want to know them, to be honest.
No,
I'm
no.
like, what are we going to talk about? So I can't talk about the Wolves. So I'm like, no, there's nothing else to chat about. So yeah. But it'd be weird if you're like, I don't like or listen to music. Okay, cool. All right,
And so they're exactly. So therefore, there's kind of like, even though they might not understand the nuances of different PROs around the world, they'd be quite happy to go, we should do this because it's helping people to do the right thing. So that's just an awareness thing, isn't it?
Completely. Yeah. And I should say, there's no cost to the venue at all. We've never charged a venue a penny. Well, our point has always been, guys, you're paying the license. We will charge the rights organisation. So in the UK, it would be PRS for Music, who I'd have thought most of your listeners would have heard of. So that's our customer in this scenario. So it's venue. We don't want to take a penny out of your pocket. You're already running a business. It's already hard enough. Just let us capture it. And the value for us is in the data, and then we can sell that data, and that's how we do it. So and we've always been passionate about that as well. Because again, I've played so many of these tiny venues, be it the live venues or like even my hairdresser down the end of the road where, I get this mop cut occasionally, he's only got 3 seats in there. It's a lot of money for him to be paying out. So he doesn't want to think about anymore. Me going in and saying, hey, could you pay me a tenner a month, 20, whatever the money that we want to ask him for. It's like, mate, I've already got too many things. I'm running a business here. Like I don't need more costs. We need costs down. It's not easy to run a business as it is. So, if it's just that it plugs in, we need a power socket. It costs 50 pence a year on the power socket. That's all we need from you. People are like, yeah, cool. Absolutely great.
Wow.
Leave me to it.
Okay, so that local hairdresser's down the road from you, they would just be they wouldn't have to pay for it.
No. So actually, he's got one because, of course, I know them, and he's been cutting this for years. But yeah, and actually, because he's a friend, you just say, oh, by the way, can I leave that one? And it's been in there actually a couple of years now, and it's just there tracking away. And it's funny because I reckon if I dialed into their data, the 3 lads that are there, I could probably tell you who's chosen the playlist that day. Because if it's James, it's Radio 2 he's got on there. If it's one of the other lads, Jake, one of the other lads, loves a bit of metal, so I know that it would be him. So you could almost define and look at that and go, okay, we can tell I can tell who's on each day. It's probably a unique insight for me to go, wow, we don't want to get my hair cut with today. Oh yeah, it looks like James is in. I'll go and do it. But even that, it comes down to taste. It's almost back to the who gets to control the aux cable. The kids probably won't get that reference, but it was that's what it is. And I think you're seeing that in businesses, even with smart speakers. Our office, we've just got a couple of the Apple Home Pods, and it's like whose turn is it to choose the playlist? So for us, we never allow Sarah because she's just 100% techno. But it's like, this is too much, Sarah. But genuinely, we can look and we can. And it's great for discovery as well for all of us. And I think lots of offices do that as well. It's like, who's putting the playlist on today? Who's going to tell you what the new music they found is, or, what gig they've just been to. So therefore they're having a revival coming back on it, all that kind of stuff as well. So,
Wow, that's fantastic. Do I'm just thinking of other unexpected sort of outcomes here. Do you know the way that what do you think about this one, right? The way a lot of corporate playlisting works, the way that let's say, for example, fast food, they want people to behave a certain way, but then let's say, for example, McDonald's is a largely franchise model, right? So actually locally they kind of end up playing whatever they really want, and they put the radio on and I suppose there's a sense of autonomy there, but really they should be playing what they're being told to play. Now that would be useful, right? So not to get anybody in trouble, but that would be useful for large corporations
Yep.
to be able to go, actually, are they playing what we'd like them to play? And that helps, this data
Completely.
helps them to regulate that.
Yeah, I think there's a localization. So, does the McDonald's on the Hagley Road on the way to Birmingham, should that have the same playlist as the McDonald's on Oxford Street in London? Probably not, because it's a completely different sort of customer, right? So, and actually the one on Oxford Street might have heavier footfall. So you might want faster music so people eat quicker and they get out quicker,
Right.
because you might want to turn. The other one, I don't know, Birmingham, you might want to slow them down because there's a chance of selling them an ice cream or something extra after their kind of, their meal and things. So I think there's that. The background music space is fascinating because we've seen it in markets where, the staff just unplug it. They leave the tablet plugged in that's playing it, but again, they aux cable into their own phone and they play it. So what then gets reported versus what is played on the shop floor, the restaurant floor, whatever you want to call it, doesn't correspond at all, because they're, or particularly at Christmas, they just cannot cope with Mariah Carey anymore. They're like, I've just got to unplug this for a day. So I think there's that side. So I think there's influence. And actually there's other tactical things. So one of the things that we saw again in Australia was Australian domestic music was decreasing its market share on streaming services. So like literally they were losing percentage points every single year. And what we were seeing in public performance was actually they were in double digits. They were nearly in the 30th percentile. So they were going, well, this is firstly great because they're keeping Aussie dollars in Australia. So, they have a job that if an Ed Sheeran song is played in there to collect the money and send it back to the UK, but also, they're members of the Australian artists. So they really want to drive it. And one of the things that they did, and I guess this is kind of, cultural significance, and we probably don't have to think about this as Brits or maybe the Americans are saying, because we know that, kind of Anglo repertoire dominates, but they launched a campaign called Aussiefy. And it was about driving Australian artists to be played more, be it in public performance venues, be it through your headphones on your Spotify account or in your car, etc., because they were really, really worried about their market share decreasing. And there are territories. So I think France and Germany, they actually have like a cultural deduction tariff. So they can just go, look, even if 99% of the music that's played in Germany was American, we're going to take a cultural deduction because we need to still drive German creativity and kind of music creation. Don't quote me on the exact numbers, but there is definitely a deduction.
Yeah.
Australia didn't have that, but actually doing it through an effective campaign and showing and back through education, exactly what you do and driving that, all of a sudden, again, businesses listened. They went, yeah, you know what? We do need that. We need to protect our own. We need to make sure we're doing that. And of course, we were seeing double-digit growth again in public performance because as the campaign launched, we could measure it almost second by second, and we could really see that impact. So yeah.
Wow. This is also going to have an economic lift on to the prevention of black boxing.
Completely.
Yeah. So all that black boxing just goes to where it should be going, which drives the economics, the economics up for everything, right?
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. And look, there's, I have lots of people say, oh, black box. There's always got to be a bit of holdback, right? Because there's always going to be a dispute. There's always going to be something. But yeah, we can drive that black box down. It shouldn't be it's different in everywhere, but if say there's a country that's got a black box that's worth 20 million a year, 20 million pounds, dollars, euros, currency is about the same at the moment based on the exchange. I think, it's about 1 for 1, but that black box could probably be reduced by 90%. So then, yes, you do need to hold on to a little bit in case something or somebody has a claim and they can prove something and do it. But yeah, again, it's getting money out much quicker. And of course, the biggest concern that people talk about in the industry on black boxes, there's a statute of limitation. So you could get to the end of, say, a 3-year period where nobody's claimed any money out of that box and it's got 30 million pounds in there. Well, you still got to distribute it. You can't just, PRS can't just throw a big staff party on it. It doesn't work like that. So what do? They have to go back on previous market share, which if that was then all swayed to the majors and there was inaccuracy in there, again, the little guy's losing. every single time. So, you know, that money could have been sat there because, look, let's face it, the biggest major labels in the world, they have analysts, they have people working on it, and they're trying to make sure they're getting every single line that they can and going on it. You know, if you're a local singer-songwriter just on the circuit of the Midlands, and that's all you do, and you're not, you know, most artists aren't really that commercially savvy because they're artists, you know, it's not what they need to do. But all of a sudden, if you can reduce that, you can get those extra pennies and they get the fuel in their van or buy the next set of guitar strings to play their next gig. That is real impact, and it shortens and it brings it into their wallets much quicker.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to give you one more though. We did have a really interesting use case. So I was on a panel. It should have been probably about 18 months ago now. And a guy came running up to me at the end and he said, "We need to talk." And I was like, "Okay, cool. What do we need to talk about?" He said, "I run a dating app." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "I've been married for 14 years, so it's, you know, not interested." Anyway, we laugh and we joke. And he said, No. He said, "The way that we are matching people is by their playlist." He said, "So you put your top 3 playlists into the app. We match you with somebody who has similar playlists or crossover or similar influences." He went, "Can I now match this with your data? Because I want to suggest where they go on the first date." And I went, "Oh my God, that's brilliant." He said, "Because there might be like metalheads and we need to recommend a metal pub or an indie pub or whatever that they need to do." And I was like, this is genius. So yeah, so we did some work with them and we're actually working on some others as well, where we can really try and help suggest and go, hey, so I had never seen that for coming at all, but I've got this, you know, this hope that one day somebody will go, "It was because of your playlist." And Audoo is a completely made up word as the company name. So, you know, I'm hoping somebody will put it in as their child's middle name. You know, you never know. So yeah, we'll see. So
that would be good.
It'd be funny.
Now that's just making me immediately think of all these other different sectors and different ideas that people could then go, if we can have a look at that data and what that looks like, then we can make more informed choices on experiential led things or whatever it might be. That's fascinating. Can I ask you one last question about the technology?
Of course.
Because I'm just thinking that of the kind of questions that people might ask me. So, so the microphones that you mentioned, which is fascinating, by the way. That's there it is. That's fascinating. Is that so? That's designed to pick, you know, to zoom into the background and pick up the. So, is it that the technology is analyzing like waveforms of recordings, as well as is it able to analyze text so that people can understand, like, oh, it's that band over there are doing a cover of, I don't know, Wonderwall, and they're analysing the text. So it's analysing live performance as well as recordings.
Exactly. So we kind of see it. We break it into 3 sectors. So we've got background music. So that is somebody just streaming, playing a CD. We're in places like jukeboxes, which is so cool. Like just the smell and the look of a jukebox. DJ. So if you've got a DJ who's mixing, pitch shifting, all that kind of stuff. And then we internally call it live, true live, you know. So, you know, somebody stood on an open mic night with a guitar doing a cover of Wonderwall. And the way that we do it is, you know, kind of, most people know how Shazam works. So that's background music. The pitch shifting is kind of like Shazam Plus, because it's us doing all this analyzation, going, oh, that suddenly sped up, that slowed down, or there's a sample dropped in there. What sample is that? So we're analyzing every second. And then in live music, we do 3 things at the same time. So we look for melody. So is there a repeating melody that we're catching and going, okay, that sounds like it's there. And that could be everything from a guitar lick to a bass pattern. It could be a drum pattern. It could be a vocal pattern. What is that melody doing? The second one is then rhythmic. So we pull that together as well. So again, is there a repeating drum pattern, a repeating bass pattern that's happening? And we go, oh, okay, that's a rhythmic pattern. And that sounds very similar to these things. And then the final one is lyrics. So we pull lyrics in and we go, okay, cool. So, you know, this was a death metal version of Wonderwall because we've got the lyrics, you know, it's really, really heavy. So we're not hearing an acoustic guitar like the original, but we know that the lyrics are Wonderwall and that they pulled it in over that. And then we pull all that together and we go, hey, we now have a 90% probability that genuinely was, you know, a live version of Wonderwall happening in this pub at this time as well. So so it's about putting it all in. So I'm very, very lucky. We've got a team who are far more intelligent than me now. You know, I get to spend my time doing this. They're building the future quite literally. So it's cool.
That is utterly incredible. I mean, the fact that I'm just thinking, like, there's so many facets of that there that fall in line with sort of, you know, overall general copyright jurisdiction on songs.
Yeah.
So, for example, you know, there's not that much point analysing chords, right? Because chords in isolation can't be copywritten anyway, right?
Yeah.
But whereas if lyrics alone can, and then when they're combined with rhythm, and then the rhythm can tap into what song that there's so many, like, you've left no stone unturned there, Ryan.
So,
that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we always say, because people always say, oh, how accurate are you in live? And we go, guys, like, there's no such thing as an accuracy percentage because the variables are unlimited, essentially. But what we can do, because, you know, what this ultimately comes back to is maths and statistics. So, you know, we can go, guys, look, we were in this venue. So I nearly said the Rock Cafe in Stourbridge, which is a venue I grew up playing in. So I don't think it's called that anymore, but, you know, we were in the Rock Cafe and, you know, throughout the 7 nights, there were X amount of performances. And we know that because we would pull the Google API and we would see the listings that they've done. So, and we know these were the performance times. And, you know, set 1, they played 6 songs. Of the 6 songs, 5 of them we were 90% sure it matched to this recording, and the other one we're either 50% sure or we just don't know it. We just don't know what it is, but we know there was music. So you've got a few minutes gap in there. And that's how we would go through that report with them to go, look, it's more and more and more. And what that does, and PRS here have just made a lot of noise about set list reporting because they want every artist to report their set list. Now there's couple of fundamental problems with it. So the first one, if you're a wedding band, you know, that just plays exclusively covers, you don't own any of those rights. So, you know, you play the gig, you probably get paid cash at the end of the night, right? And you all drive off, you know, home, and that's it. You're not going to see any royalties down the line because you got paid for your performance. And actually there's no incentive for that wedding band to then go and upload it. You know, I mean, there's kind of a responsibility, but there is no incentive for doing that. So that just doesn't happen at all. You've then got mid-level touring bands and different things also needing to report, but, you know, they're mid-level. They're probably still trying to be a bit cool. You know, they're not thinking about the paperwork. You know, you don't finish a great gig at the end of the night and go, oh, need to write out my set list and go and submit it on an app or anything like that. It just doesn't happen at all. And then the final bit that, you know, and this is probably my reminder to PRS is, on average, they're taking a 25% commission rate. So you've got to do all the work. You've got to submit it all to them. And then they're going to take a 25% cut, which is what they do in live in their tariffs. And then they're going to pay out the end artist. So again, going back to that wedding band. So you've done all the work. You've been paid your cash for the gig. You've got to then go home, file a load of paperwork. You're not going to see a penny of it. PRS are going to get paid, and the other artist is going to get something 12 to 18 months down the line, assuming that they even get allocated in that. So again, goes back to, you know, why have we spent so much time, money, effort developing this live scenario? Because it's just forgotten. Let's get the artist focusing on the art, and, you know, let us as a tech company handle our bit, and let PRS or whatever organization handle their bit, which is knowing who should be paid and how much they should be paid. And they've got all their bank account details and all the other bits, or if their rights moves between publishers, what their cut is, etc. That's what they are best at and what they do at. But it's just adding value to the whole chain for everybody.
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Honestly, I really congratulate you for what you've built. Honestly, thank you. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And thank you for coming and talking about it here as well today, Ryan, because, you know, it must be tough, right, to find time to just, you know, take your head above the water. And, you know, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Look, I think, you know, we're very proud of what we've built. We've got an amazing team who are just actually so relentless, because we can see the mission, you know, and we've had thank yous from, quite frankly, our heroes, the biggest artists on the planet, when we've been at events and they're like, I heard about this, please keep going, we love it, you know, to, it's just special to me to go to my local pub on a Friday night and know that artist and know that we can help them. Sadly we're not working with PRS in the UK, but there are other territories we go into, and I've had it, and people just run up and hug, and they're like, thank you, and I'm like, we're getting paid, right? We're okay, but we're doing this for all the right reasons, and it's what we care about, and we're going to keep going. And I think, look, my message to anybody listening is, if you're an artist, if you're a venue owner, or anything in that value chain, and you ever want to know, or we can help in any way, look, we're more than half a decade in, we've started to get to feel like everybody, or we're getting to know everybody as well. And the amount of times we can just connect and say, we've had people say, hey, I just don't think I'm being paid right. Can you help with this? And we can go, look, we know that person in that market. We'll send them an email and we'll get you connected as well. Or if there's a venue who wants to receive one and they just want the data for their social media channel, their top 10 played songs or whatever it is, they might not want to, admit all of them. We do see a lot of Spice Girls music played, but like whatever they want to do, we're more than happy to help, right? We're, I'm a Midlander at heart. You always help, you always smile, you just have to get on with it. So yeah, it's good.
Good for you, man. Good for you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Ryan. That's brilliant.
Anytime. Thanks, Johnny.
Okay, there you go, everybody. Wow. What a dude. What a company. I meant it when I say I think he's doing God's work there, right? There's so much to pick apart from this. So let's just have a think about it for a minute, right? The goal is to be able to accurately and fairly compensate rights holders. Brilliant. If that works and that's all it does, that's brilliant. But I think it's going to do a lot more than that, right? It's going to be able to give us a much more accurate depiction on usage and experience-led opportunities for music curation, right? So what we're talking about is something where if venues adopt this, and why wouldn't they, especially if they don't have to pay for it, especially if their local performing rights organization is actually going to foot the bill for it, all they have to do is plug it in. And it's so sophisticated that actually it can pick up all sorts of different nuances, just like what Ryan explained in the interview. I think once we get there with that, and we already are to a certain extent, you heard Ryan talk about that in the interview there, about how this has been adopted in many countries with a lot of support from local PROs. I think once we see this roll out globally, it might just change everything forever. I know that sounds really dramatic, but I actually think it will. And that is why I wanted to get Ryan on to talk to him today, so that you can see for yourselves what he and his team have built and how it might change things moving forward. Ryan is somebody who once I found out about what they were building, I reached out to him on LinkedIn. I said, hey, how you doing? Can I talk to you? Can I interview you about this? And as you saw today, he came on and he's a real true gentleman. So I hope that you enjoyed that. If you want to know more about it, it's Audoo, Audoo. They are changing everything forever. I think roll back on this episode in years to come and you'll go, oh yeah, remember that thing we spoke about? It all happened. I think it will. Let's get ready for it. It's about to make everything better. Okay, until next time, everybody, have a great day and may the force be with you.